Okay, we'll be starting. Thank you for everyone for joining. Today's microlearning is on Unlock Unmatched Success, Master the Art of Co-Creation with Dr. Ivan Misner. For those who are kind of watching this in the live Zoom audience, or if you're watching this via live stream on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Meta, I want you to introduce yourselves in the chat or in the comment section. Make sure you maybe give your name and also what city you're coming from. And also, if you want to kind of connect, and broaden your network on LinkedIn, you could also include your LinkedIn profile as well. Once again, this is a microlearning. Our Community of Seven microlearning series focuses on helping you elevate your career and personal life through short talks like this. This is not a webinar where you passively listen to a talking head. We want you to take 1, 2, 3 actions after we hang up. So once again, today's microlearning is on Unmatched Success, Master the Art of Co-Creation with Dr. Ivan Misner. Quick quiz for you, whether you are watching this in the live Zoom audience or if you're watching this on one of the different platforms. In the comments, I want you to answer this question, and you could just say yes or no in the chat. How many of you believe in the adage, your network is your net worth? How many of you believe in the adage, your network is your net worth? So let me know in the chat or the comment. Okay, awesome. And second question, how many of you have fears networking? Let me know in the chat. And last question, how many of you have used partnerships or co-creation in either your work or in maybe outside project you might have? Yes or no? Okay, awesome. So good morning, everyone. I am so excited to welcome you to today's event, Unlocked Unmatched Success, Master the Art of Co-Creation. We're really going to dive deep into this powerful principle that can transform not only the way you do business, but the way you build relationships and create lasting impact. I'm really excited to have Dr. Ivan Misner today. Ivan, I'm going to call him Ivan for the rest of this talk. I actually met him at an event, Transformation Leadership Council in Vail. And that event itself is very transformative for me personally, as a kind of performance coach. And I think those of you that have been to these calls for a while, you know that I'm an introvert, and it takes a lot. My husband always jokes around that my other job, if I wasn't married and had kids, would be to be a monk and just kind of stay home all day. So the whole notion of networking for me as an introvert, and I also have social anxiety, was something that was like my biggest fear. And I ended up, for some random reason, being in a professions where I had to be client facing and I had to be social. So I had to really conquer that fear. And so, and then, I was an executive, climbed up the ladder, and then I ended up starting Community of Seven. And one of the things that, when starting it through the pandemic, when I was first starting it, it was so lonely because it was just literally me trying to figure things out. And then eventually, what I started doing was I would have these monthly calls with other founders, like Tracy Avin from Troop HR, David Berkowitz from Serial Marketers. And we still, to this day, 4 years later, meet monthly. And this kind of process of what I'll call co-creation has been so powerful because we were all of these community-minded leaders. And I know it's changed my life. And, this is why I'm so excited, because we literally have this visionary, Ivan, is going to be talking about networking and relationship building. If you've ever heard of the phrase, it's not what you know, but who you know, then you already have a taste of what networking is about. But Dr. Misner has taken the concept to another level, and he's redefined it for this modern world. And before we get in today's conversation, I want to paint a picture for you, because I don't think my words are going to do what Ivan has created justice. Imagine an organization that spans 76 countries, with over 11,000 chapters, a global network so powerful that it generated $23.4 billion in business last year alone. That's the impact of BNI, Business Network International, founded by Ivan in 1985. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with it, BNI, it's the world's largest business networking organization, and its foundation is built on just one principle: givers gain. Oh, I love that. Let me repeat it. Givers gain. In other words, when you help other people succeed, you in turn set yourself up for success. So let me quickly introduce to you Dr. Ivan Misner. He's a founder and chief visionary officer of BNI. And let me also spotlight him. Hello, Ivan.
Hello.
So BNI is the world's largest business networking organization, as I mentioned, with 1,100 chapters, generating 23.4 billion in business last year alone. He's recognized by Forbes and CNN as the father of modern networking. He is a New York Times bestselling author of 30 books, including his latest Infinite Legacy, The Seven Principles, and The Third Paradigm, which I have in my hand, and it is amazing. In the reminder email that I sent to everyone, I sent you a link. If you have time, go on Amazon and buy it today. And once you get it and you read it, make sure you also comment and review, because that's how we show authors our love, right? That's how we give them a hug. So Ivan is a renowned expert on business networking. He's been featured in major outlets like the LA Times, the Wall Street Journal, to the Today Show. He holds a PhD from the University of Southern California and has been a professor of various universities, as well as a board of trustees for the University of Laverne. In addition to his amazing professional achievements, he's a black belt in karate, an amateur magician, and a humanitarian, named Humanitarian of the Year by the Red Cross. So welcome, Ivan.
Thank you. It's good to see you again. It was great seeing you at the Transformational Leadership
I
Council,
know.
which was started by Jack Canfield.
Yes. So we had both, I was like kind of a new invite to the TLC, and I saw Ivan speak, and I was like, oh my gosh, it was just so powerful. It was so
Thank
inspiring.
you.
As a business leader, it just made me kind of realize that I needed to really harness this power of not just networking, but co-creation, and that it can be like an amazing tool to grow. And you gave some really great example, which I loved. So I'm gonna, maybe ask you a few questions, and then I'm gonna let you kind of take the reign, because I know you have like you have amazing stories, but also like this
Well,
power.
I definitely want to talk about co-creation because that's what the book is about. But you opened up with networking and being an introvert. So
Yes.
can I chat about that a little
Yes,
bit first?
please, please. Are you an
Okay.
introvert? Tell me you're
Okay.
not
Well,
an
let me tell
introvert.
you the story. Um, I always thought I was an extrovert because I'm a keynote speaker. I, now run the largest networking organization. You said 11,000 and you said 1,100. It is 11,000. As of this morning, 11,190 chapters in 75, 76 countries, as you said. We now, in the last 12 months, it's now 24 billion with a B in what we call thank you for closed business. That's the amount of business that was generated for our members. Now, just to put that in perspective, and I don't think I said this at TLC, I wish I had. If you take a look at the United Nations estimates of GDP, gross domestic product, there are actually 100 countries in the world with a lower GDP than what BNI generated for its members in the last 12 months, which blows my mind. It's just incredible to me. And the introvert extrovert thing is interesting because I assumed for many years I was an extrovert because I'm a keynote speaker and started BNI. And probably must have been 15 to 20 years ago. My late wife, she passed away in 2020, but my late wife, I said something to her about, oh, you know me, honey, I'm an extrovert. And she's like, no, you're not. I'm like, what? What do you mean I'm not? Of course I am. I'm a keynote speaker. I run the largest networking organization. Of course I'm an extrovert. And she was like, okay, honey, whatever you want to believe, that's fine. Like, no, don't say that. What do you mean? And so she said, well, I'm reading the book, The Introvert and Extrovert in Love. And and so she started naming these characteristics of an introvert. And I'm like, yeah, that's a little like me. And okay, that's a little like me. And then the one that really hit home was introverts, they recharge their batteries by being alone. They don't want anyone around them other than maybe family or their significant other, but they hide basically. They become a hermit. And I'm like, okay, that's totally me. I get it. But I am not an introvert. That's what I told her.
So you're ambivert.
Well, so I was so annoyed. I went to my office at home. This is my home office in Austin, Texas. And I saw we have somebody here from Austin, Texas that's online with us. Um, at the time, I lived in the Inland Valley, and I see that there's somebody from the Inland Valley also here in California. At the time, I lived there in Claremont. And so I went into my office there and I took a test because I was going to show her I am not an introvert. And I took this test and came back and said, congratulations, Ivan Misner. You are an introvert who
Mm.
is a situational extrovert. And it explained that a situational extrovert is somebody that when they are talking about a topic that they know and like and are interested in, or when they're with close friends or people they trust, they come across as an extrovert. Otherwise, it said, you're an introvert, go apologize to your wife. Okay, didn't say the last part, but I did. I went and apologized to Elizabeth and said, wow, I didn't. But when you think about it, the way I set up BNI, one person per profession, we get together every week, we pass each other referrals. I went to big networking groups, and those big networking groups, I felt like overshadowed.
Well, so
And
what is that what inspired you
yeah,
to start BNI was
yeah, yeah. I didn't like the networking groups that were out there. I went to some networking groups that were very mercenary. It
yeah,
was,
it's
everybody
about
was trying
take,
to sell
take,
to each
take,
other.
right? And I love the whole notion of giving. And
Yeah, which came from that, but came from the idea of you go to a network and everybody's trying to sell to you. And then I went to other groups that were very social. It was happy hour and hors d'oeuvres, and nobody was doing business. Well, that didn't do me any good either. So I didn't like either of those two. I wanted something that was business oriented but not transactional, and something that had a relational aspect but wasn't totally social. And so that's why I created BNI. And of course, our principal core value is givers gain, as you
yeah,
mentioned. Thank you. But I love this concept, and I think it's one of the reasons why we're the largest networking organization. Givers gain is more than a phrase to me. It's a way of living one's life. It's a perspective to view and interact with the world. It's an attitude, not an expectation. And when
uh,
it's applied properly, it'll change your life. And when it changes enough lives, it'll change the world. And that's what we're trying to do in BNI, change the way the world does business by building relationships with people through networking. And
and you
co-creation became a part of that.
and you've definitely changed so many lives. I mean, just reading some of the testimonials and just watching some of the videos just from your website of just people's lives, literally businesses being created, partnerships happening, like lifetime
Mm.
partnerships.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
an amazing
And
legacy.
a few marriages.
Really? That's
Well, I
awesome.
met I met my late wife in BNI.
Oh, really?
And yeah, she was a member of BNI. And
I hope she got free
ironically,
dues.
And ironically, she passed away in 2020, and a year later, I was introduced to someone who I married last year, who was she worked for Jack Canfield, so it was another referral. So I have had my two marriages through referrals.
I love that. It talks about the power of relationships
Yeah,
and how, you know, these relationships can really change our lives.
they
So,
can, they can,
yeah.
and they can in a very, very positive way. And it's really important to surround yourself with people that have values that are congruent with yours. I wrote another book, which I've talked about in a TLC meeting in the past, called Who's in Your Room?
Mhm.
And it's about the people you surround yourself with. And the idea with Who's in Your Room is that imagine that you live your life in one room, your entire life in one room. And that one room has only one door. And that one door is an enter only door so that when people come into your room or into your life, They're there forever. You
Mm,
can never get them out.
mm.
That's a little frightening, isn't it? And,
Yes.
and people say, well, it's a metaphor. I can get people out of my life. Well, yeah, you can get them out of your life, but let's think about this. Imagine, I want everyone who's listening to this or watching this, I want you to think about somebody that you got out of your life. But I want to think about why you wanted them out of your life. What was it that they did that made you want them out of your life? What was the last thing in particular where you said, that's it, I'm done. They're out of my life. Now, Lanfan, I you don't have to say who it is, but do you have somebody in mind?
Yes.
Okay. So if you're listening to this or watching this, you probably have somebody in mind as well. And here's the thing. If they're still in your head, they're still in your room. They
Mm.
will be for the rest of your life because the room, people, it's not a house, it's not a room. The room starts here. I'm pointing for those listening, I'm pointing to one side of my head and ends here. It's your brain, it's your mind, it's the people that you let into your head. And so it's very important that you create a network of people that you know, like, and trust, and that you build relationships with each other, and that you understand that networking is more about farming than it is about hunting. It's about cultivating those relationships with other business professionals. And we haven't even touched upon co-creation yet, but
I
that's
know. I love,
that's some
I
of
mean,
my networking
I could
stuff.
literally talk to you about, I mean, I want to go into co-creation, but I think what you just said was so powerful. I often think of the quote, we are the average of the five people we spend the most
Yeah,
time with.
yeah,
And I also know, um, I kind of consider myself a giver. And my life changed when I surrounded myself with givers and eliminated the takers in my life.
yeah,
And it's funny because your organization is built around giving.
yeah,
And I think that creates such a different dynamic when everyone, and that's how I felt about the Transformation Leadership Council too. And I think Greg's on the line too from TLC.
yeah. I
Um,
see Greg. I see his
but
photo
there's,
anyway.
yeah, but there's this
Hey,
feeling
Greg.
of like when you're around a community of givers, that sense of like, do I have to watch my back?
Right.
Can I trust this person? It kind of dissipates.
It
And
does.
I had Stephen Covey, MR Covey, his
Stephen M.
father.
R. Covey, he's a member of TLC. He
Oh,
hasn't
he
been in a
is.
long time. He's a member. Yeah.
Yeah, but so I had him before I was in TLC a few years ago, and we talked about trust. And when you have these communities of trust,
Yeah.
things just get happen much more quicker. So
Much
let's
quicker.
talk about this main topic
Well,
because I
let's start. Let's just talk a little bit more about TLC because
I'll see.
um,
Okay.
if you look at the book, The Third Paradigm, which you have,
Yeah.
Dawa Phillips is a fellow member of TLC. So he's a member. He wasn't at the meeting that you were at.
Yeah, yeah.
Stuart Emery is a member of TLC, and he co-wrote "Who's in Your Room" with me. And so there have been many projects that I have done with various, and Jack Canfield, of course, he just co-wrote a book called The Relationship Economy with me, which
Mm.
is
How do
only
you
in
write all
Italian
these
right now.
books? I mean, I
Yeah.
struggled to
Yeah.
write this one book. How do you...
Okay, you want the secret?
Yes, what's the secret?
Co-authors.
Co-creation.
Co-creation. You get
Goes back to
co-authors
co-creation.
who you can work with, who you know are committed. The Infinite Giving is my latest book. It just came out this week. So that's my 30th book.
I didn't even know about this book.
Yeah, I know. It's a great book. It's about legacy. But I had to write that book because we're celebrating our 40th anniversary for BNI in just a few months. And so I wrote a book called Infinite Legacy. But anyway, TLC, you're right. It's about your network. And so in that network for me, I have found people that I not only have a close personal relationship with, and I met Jody, my wife, through
Yeah,
TLC because Jack's business partner
yeah,
knew her and
yeah.
introduced us. Introduced us by Zoom, by the way. This is how I met my wife.
Was it during the pandemic?
It was during the pandemic. Yeah, we met. We met about
Online dating.
well, it was an online introduction for sure, and it was my wife passed away in 2020. I met Jody in 2021 by Zoom, and we got married in 2023.
You
And
know what it
so
is? You know what it is, Ivan? I always say we create our luck. And one
Yeah.
of the ways we create our luck is being out there by
Yeah.
connecting with people. It's like you said, the community you build.
Yes.
And
The harder
I
you work, the luckier you get.
exactly, exactly. And it's just the power of like these relationships. Like most of my clients or speaking event gigs or training events have all been referrals, like
Yeah.
pretty much 99%. And it's that power of building these relationships. And I think it's also keeping in touch and nurturing.
Yes.
So like there's people who I've worked with 20, 30, 40 years ago when I was in corporate, and I've still maintained those relationships because it's not about I used to do sales when I was younger, and I used to tell my team, you know, when you're successful when you get invited to their birthday parties or their kids' birthday
Yeah.
parties,
Yes.
right? Because then
Yeah.
you move into that, and I know there's kind of this backlash in terms of, well, don't call people family at work, but
Yeah.
like I still had this belief of you build these deep connections where these meaningful connections that are beyond just this transactional, let's do business. And then you'll have customers, you'll have clients, you'll have resources for the rest of your life,
All right.
right?
So we keep popping in and out of different books,
I
but but I
know.
got to talk about another book I did. It was about gender and networking because what you're talking about, I think women are way better at than men.
Yeah.
And I did a book. The title is weird, but I did a book called Business Networking and Sex. Not what you think. The subtitle is Not What You
Field.
Think, and it's about the difference between men and women and how they network.
Yeah, yeah.
And women, we found, were much more likely to network on a relational basis, and men tended to network more on a transactional basis. And you talked about friendships. I one of the we surveyed 12,000 people for that um, book,
Yeah.
and so we had hard data that showed that women were more relational. By the way, they spent less time networking and got a higher percentage of their business through networking than men did.
Wow. Because the relationships are like,
Yes, because
yeah.
of the relationship. And so I interviewed a friend of mine, and I was talking to her, and she said, "Well, she has a relationship with her dry cleaner," and I'm like, "You have a relationship with your dry cleaner? How does that? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Describe that to me, right?" And she said, "Well, we share recipes. The wife, it's a husband wife team, and the wife, she said they were Asian and she was Jewish, and so she shared her Jewish recipes, and they shared their Asian recipes, and so they would cook these meals that were completely different than what they grew up with.
Yeah.
And she said, I've been in, she is single, and she was invited to her kids' birthday parties, to their birthday parties, to events at their house, and she invited them. And I'm like, okay, that's a relationship. That's a real relationship.
Yeah.
And I mentioned all of this to my late wife, and she was like, well, I don't know if I have a relationship with Richard and Diane. I mean, I know they delivered clothes to us where I lived in Claremont. She said, "Well, I know that Diane really wants to travel, but Richard he doesn't like to fly, and they have this cute little dog that's just adorable. And Diane, did you know Diane fell walking down our street the other day and really hurt her knee? And oh
Because it's so
wait,
natural for women.
yes, that's my point. And she said, wait, maybe I do have a relationship with them. And I said, Richard and Diane, is that the names of our dry cleaners?
You're
And
like,
so
who
here
are
I am. Here I am. I'm supposed to be one of the world's experts on networking. And this is a relationship where I'm acting transactionally, but she was acting relationally. And I discovered from this book that I did about 10, 11 years ago that that relational beats transactional every day of the week.
Okay.
That
Can I tell you a story?
let me just say one other thing. You take
Yeah.
gender out of it,
Yeah.
you put men and women together who network transactionally, men and women together who network relationally, and the men and women who networked in a relational way based on the survey we did of 12,000 people generated more business than the men and women who networked on a transactional basis.
I
I
believe
Go ahead.
you. I believe you 100%. But the funny story I want to tell that kind of relates to that was when I used to be in corporate and I was doing sales, I was always the top salesperson. And the other sales folks were always just wondering, how did you get these meetings with these? And our target was C-suite executives.
Mhm.
And the reason why, and I remember at one point, we had an invoice and we had a member that was like, one of the top P&G companies in the world. And it was like a really big contract and they were not responsive. And the reason why I was able to get that paid, because my boss was like, how did you get that paid? And I was like, I send cat memes to their EA. And so like part of it was just building this relationship where I just
Yeah,
would joke around with the executive assistants, and the executive assistants are always the gatekeepers
they
for the
are.
senior leaders, right?
They
So
are.
they're running multi-billion dollar budgets. They don't have time and they're not looking at their emails, but their EAs, if you build the relationship. And for me, it wasn't because I was expecting something from them. It's
Yeah.
just that I would treat everyone just using my personality, just like joking around or just building rapport with people. And for me, it didn't matter if they were the office manager, the CEO,
Right.
or whoever. I just really tried to build a connection with everyone I connected with,
All
right?
right. Well, you keep taking me down these
I know.
roads, which is
We
great.
can
I love
literally
it. I
talk
love it.
forever.
And so everyone who's listening or watching this, think of how these ideas that we're talking about may apply to you in your life. Because we're telling stories about us, but you might be able to get nuggets out of this that you can apply in your own situation that makes it work. And here's one that is exactly what you're talking about. Many years ago, I was working on a book called Masters of Networking. As a matter of fact, it was my first New York Times bestselling book. I didn't know it would be a bestseller, but I really wanted this to be a good book. And I wanted John Nesbitt in the book. And John he had written the book Megatrends. And
Mhm.
he was the first person ever, ever to say that networking was the future. Business networking was the future of how would do business. And he talked about technology too, but business networking critical. And so I wanted him in the book because he was the first man to talk about it. And so I'd send him letters, and I kept getting rejections. He didn't want. He didn't want. And all I wanted was, can I just take this excerpt out of Megatrends? You don't have to write anything. And he kept saying no, no, no. And so finally, I said to him, I met somebody who knew his assistant, and I said, how do you know her? And he said, well, I had to work with her when John was coming out to do a presentation. And I said, well, could you reach out to her and ask her if she would ask him on my behalf? And he did. He reached out to Nesbitt's assistant, and Nesbitt's assistant said, yeah, of course I will. And she got him to contribute to the book, even though he told me no 2 or 3 times.
I
So
love that.
knowing the assistants are really important.
But it's just the power of being kind, right? It's not,
Yeah.
it's about just being kind to everyone you meet
Yeah.
and you build those relationships. And sometimes when you need it, it just kind of appears. So I know we want to talk about your book. I could
Yeah.
literally talk to you forever. I don't, do you want to, because when I ask you questions, we seem to go on a tangent. Do you want to take the screen and talk about co-creation?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about co-creation. And if you don't mind, I'll pull a slide or two up in just a few minutes. But um, the third paradigm, it's literally the third of three paradigms. The first paradigm is competition. And the competition really began in the late 1800s, early 1900s with the first books ever written about business management. I mean, the first books, Max Weber and Frederick Taylor and the Galbraiths, they were the first to ever write about managing a business. And everything was about competition. It was dog eat dog, put the other guy out of business. It was all about competition, and productivity was critical. People were almost irrelevant. If you read Frederick Taylor's material, I taught management theory years ago, and if you read Frederick Taylor's material, people were irrelevant. Really, it was productivity. The second paradigm you started to see really in the 60s with McGregor's Theory X, Theory Y, and the idea that on one axis is that productivity, but on the other axis is people. And the people are extremely important. And I know this, we look at this now in the 2020s and we go, yeah, that's obvious. But in the 1960s, it was not obvious. McGregor, I studied under Warren Bennis, who was in his day the world's leading expert on leadership. And he said McGregor, he worked with McGregor, and he said McGregor used to get bomb threats because it was such a radical idea that people mattered. No, it's productivity that matters. And so theory X, theory Y was theory X, productivity, theory Y, people. And that's where you get cooperation. So the second paradigm is cooperation. First paradigm is competition. Second paradigm is cooperation. Third paradigm is co-creation. It's cooperation on steroids. It's collaboration on steroids. The best example of it, that one that virtually everyone knows, is crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is an example of co-creation. You literally co-create something together. And so we did a survey of about 4,000 people. And I'll show you some of the results of the survey of 4,000 people here. Let me pull it up. Share. Here we go. And so you look here, these out of the 4,000 people, these are the top 7 areas that we found were really positive benefits of co-creation based on the survey of 4,000 people. The first is diversity of ideas. They said you get diverse ideas when you get people together really working with one another to create something together. Learning from each other was number 2. Stronger relationships was number 3. Seeing areas of the business that you wouldn't normally see by talking to other people and working with other people in the organization was next. More empowered teams and a shared sense of ownership was next. An increased quality of ideas was the 6th one, and shared resources was the 7th one. Now, what's really interesting is actually the next slide, which talks about the main drawbacks of co-creation. And so those positive things that we just looked at, they pretty much make sense, right? You kind of understand it. But the drawbacks, those are the ones that you have to be careful of if you want to create a co-creative environment. And so those were, and some of this may not surprise you either. First and foremost, personality conflicts. 2 people who just don't get along. They don't get along at all. The second is dealing with egos. And at first you may think, well, that's kind of the same as personality conflicts, but it's not. Personality conflicts is generally, 2, 3 people that just don't get along. Dealing with egos is more singular. My ego enters the room before I do, right? And one of the things you know Jack, of course, Jack Canfield. One of the things I love about Jack is that, he has sold 750 million, billion with the B, 750 million books. And his ego does not enter the room before he does. So this is the exact opposite of someone like Jack, where their ego, and I've met many people like this, not nearly as successful as him, whose ego enters the room before they do as an individual. So personality conflicts are multiple people. Dealing with egos is often just one person. Poor communication, I'm slightly surprised that it's third, because I found it to be one of the biggest issues personally, but it's a critical issue in terms of co-creation being successful. People who don't pull their weight, that one surprised me because I generally get people who pull their weight within my organization, but it was the 4th largest item in the survey. A lack of agreement on the final decision maker. That one doesn't surprise me. There has to be an agreement on who it is that makes the final decision, because you can't have a vote on everything. At some point, somebody's got to make the final decision. Individuals hijacking the direction of the project. Let me tell you, I've really experienced that one, so I get it. And a non-aligned vision for the direction of the project. These are the 7 main drawbacks of co-creation. Now, I'm happy to show more slides, but why don't we stop there and see if you've got any thoughts or observations. Oh, you know what? I take it back. There's one more slide I want to show.
Share away.
One more, and then we'll go back. And that's this slide, which we discovered was this is the way to address those 7 positive aspects of co-creation and the 7 drawbacks is that you need to know the 4 no's. You need to know the right focus. What are you going to focus on? You need to know the right process. What's the process you're going to use for co-creation? You need to know the right communication. All of this is talked about in the book. The right communication, and it varies. One of the key elements that we talked about in there is communication saturation. That when you have conflict, you just saturate the community, the stakeholders, with communication. And you need to know the right execution. How do you execute on the project? If you have these 4 no's and you understand the 7 benefits and the 7 drawbacks, you can create an amazing co-creative process. And I tell, as you know, a story in the book about Richard and his experience. And if you want, I'll tell the secret of that.
Please tell us. I love
You
your
want me to tell
story.
you? All right. So those of you who get the book, Third Paradigm, it tells us a story about Richard and a project that Richard has that was a great example of the third paradigm, because Richard started with the first paradigm competition. He found that he wanted an online platform, and he found that instead he thought that cream would rise to the top and the best would show up. But instead, what happened was silos were built, and people would protect their own package and argue against everybody else's online platform. So competition didn't work. Cooperation didn't work because when everyone tried to cooperate and create something, it was, a horse is a camel is a horse as designed by committee. And the cooperation didn't work, and that failed horribly. And the third paradigm was co-creation. And so the book, interwoven throughout every chapter, is not only the data, which we show, but Richard's story. So here's the secret. We never say this outright in the book, but Richard is my middle name, and the online platform is actually BNI Connect. We decided not to say that blatantly because we didn't want it to be that story to be about just one of the authors. But it's a true story, and it happens to be Richard's me, and it happens to be about the BNI platform where we knew that we generated 24 billion in the last 12 months in business because of that platform.
Wow. So we have a lot of different people who are on the call or watching it via the live stream. And so we have, a good mixture of people who maybe are working at big, maybe Fortune 100 companies, but we also have people who are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, or whatnot. So let me I think it's easier to maybe do co-creation when you have a bigger infrastructure. But let's say you are a solopreneur, or let's say you are, an entrepreneur with a small team. How do you go about co-creating? Like what are the process?
Well, look, the larger the team, the more chaos is created by co-creation. So a
Can I give
smaller
you
team.
can I give you another funny story? The
Yeah.
reason why my company is called Community of Seven is that 7 is the ideal number for a meeting. Anything beyond 7, each person you add, you lose productivity by 10%. So, and then it goes back to the whole Amazon, story of Jeff Bezos saying there should be no meeting at Amazon. Every meeting should, you should be able to feed um, um, everyone at the meeting with 2 pizzas, right? So it's this whole notion. So, but it's this, okay, co-creation is great, but what happens when it becomes too big if you can talk more about that.
Well, as your organization, as it's small, co-creation is actually easier because there's fewer people to deal with the ego issue and the trying to hijack the direction of the project, all of the problems that exist. Communication is also easier, but as an organization gets larger, it becomes much more challenging and in some ways counterintuitive. For example, and you heard me talk about this in the TLC presentation, one of the things that I spoke about when I did the full 1 hour talk was that you have to let barking dogs in.
Mm.
Got to let the barking
That
dogs
was a
in.
powerful story you shared too. I know it's
Well,
be
which
too long
one?
for this. it was the one where everyone was yelling at you in the meeting.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, that's a long story. Let me see if I can make it as short as possible. All right. Okay. You want the whole, I'll try and give you as much of as I
No, but you
can,
know
but I
why
got
I
to,
think it's powerful is that I think people stray away from uncomfortable conversations.
yep,
And
yep.
I think part of being a leader is navigating those conversations.
Yeah. And so this is the whole thing that I have about. And so the first thing that I had to do was, it was my fault that the program was where it was. If I scroll up a few slides, it'll be a photo of the Hindenburg because the program that I did crashed and burned like the Hindenburg. It was horrible. And so the first thing I had to do was take responsibility. And I was meeting with about 30, 35 people. And before the big conference where I had to tell everybody what we were going to do. And I had a plan, but I couldn't go in there and say I got a plan because they needed to vent. And so, the first thing I did was take responsibility for the disaster that the platform was that I did through cooperation. The second thing was to listen till they drop strategy. Listen till they drop. And the plan was just shut up and listen. And so I literally had, and when you're the founder of an organization, I was in charge. The hardest thing is to shut up, shut the bad word up, right? You just be quiet, let people vent. And so you listen till they drop. And what I said what I would do is you tell me everything you hate about the program that exists now, and I'm going to write it down on a flip chart, and we'll see how many things that we've got to deal with. And so I did, and it was basically the rope-a-dope strategy where Fraser and Ali had a fight, and I think it was the rumble in the jungle in Africa, and Fraser just beat the living tar out of Ali round after round after round until Frazier got so tired, or was it Foreman? I'm sorry, Foreman got so tired that that Ali then came out and was able to win the fight. But Ali had to let Foreman really punch on him for round after round. And so I went into this with this idea of letting people just punch on me verbally for a long period of time. And then I had to recognize the issues, and we literally had a room full of flip charts of all the complaints that there were. It ended up being over 500 complaints. I wish I'd actually take, this is not a photo of the room, the real room, but the entire room was wallpapered with these things. And so this was all part of the co-creative. This was leading up to a co-creative solution. The first thing I had to do was take responsibility and hear all the issues. And these are the kinds of things that I had to do. I had to keep calm and have a strategy. I had a strategy, but I couldn't go in. If I went in and said, okay, I know you're all upset, but I have an idea, and this is my idea, they would have just strung me up. They would have hung me up like this. And so I had to just let them vent and get it all out so that by the time they had it all out, I would be able to give them a suggestion or two. And so my suggestion started with these buttons. These are the actual buttons that I handed out. My staff handed them out to everybody, and they're like, what is this? And I said to everyone, and I think this is where you were headed with the question. Hey, everybody, are you open to an idea? Because I appreciate all your suggestions. I appreciate how upset you are. But I have an idea. Are you open to an idea? And they said yes. And I said, well, let's triage this list of 500 things. I didn't know it was 500, hundreds of things. Let's triage this list. Let me create a project board. And the project board will be made up of you and a few other people who are technically qualified. We'll triage the list. We'll solve the problems. We'll do this together. I even said to them, I think this could be a case study in a book someday. I actually said that to them. And then we handed out these buttons, and they're like, what are these buttons? And I said, everything's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
I
We're
love
going to get through this. We're going to get through it together. I created the problem. We're going to create the solution. And then I brought in, and I don't know if I have it on this slide or the next slide. No, I don't have it on this slide. I should. I brought in a guy. Well, let me see if I can find it real quick. No, I don't. I don't have it on this. I brought in somebody else from TLC. who um, did a song called "Everything's Going to Be Okay." And he came in when we had the whole convention, and he was like, "Everything's going to be okay," and everybody's standing up and singing, and everything's going to be okay. And that was the beginning of the turnaround, and the beginning of recognizing that co-creation could work. And that's where I realized I need to let the barking dogs in, because they're going to be outside barking anyway. But if I let them into the process, then I'm going to know how they feel. I'm going to know how they're addressing these issues. So,
That
does
is
that
so
answer your question?
That is so powerful. You need to let the barking dogs in. And
Yeah.
I think that's the thing with co-creation is that in order for it to be really effective, you're going to have divergent ideas. Not everyone, if you have a homogenous group, you're not going to have innovation, right? Innovation happens in these uncomfortable moments where people come with different ideas and thoughts. And
Yeah. And if you pay attention to that, it's powerful. And what's interesting, and you got to know this going into it. And I saw this, and I did survey, not only surveys, but I did interviews where I'd have my marketing people say, "Why do you have the IT people in on these meetings? Because they don't understand the business like we understand the business, and they shouldn't be here." And
yeah,
then I'd have the IT people saying, "Why do you have the marketing people on these same meetings? Same meetings. Why do you have the marketing people on these meetings? Because they don't understand the technology, and they have to understand the technology." And I would be saying to both of them, "You both need to be here because you
yeah.
both need to understand the other side of it. If all you do is understand your piece of it, you don't get the big picture." And so they would, nobody ever said, "Yay, let's have them all together." But they did say, "All right, I understand."
But I mean, it's
And
so true. And I've had so many similar conversations because I was a serial entrepreneur too. So I built up a lot of startups. And you have those divisions between sales and marketing and IT. And those three things need to work hand in hand together, rowing in the same direction in order to be effective. You're
yeah,
not in one island, right? So I'm going to open it up for questions from the Zoom live audience. If you have any questions, just use the emoticon.
yeah,
Um,
I'm happy to answer questions while we're waiting for the first
yeah.
one. One other key element in the book that I talk about is how often I had to tell people it's okay to disagree without being disagreeable.
Mm.
There's nothing wrong with
Did you
disagreeing. As
say
a matter
that
of
to
fact,
our politicians today?
yeah, do you think? Oh, listen, we say that at the end of the book. We say, wouldn't it be great if politicians used co-creation? But since
Exactly.
B&I stays out of politics, we didn't push that agenda too much. But yeah, co-creation would be great in government. Great. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and think about it. If we did really co-create, think about how much more effective our Congress would be, right? Like in terms of just getting things done. But because there's this friction, because it's us versus them,
Yep.
let's
Everything's us versus
and you're
them.
not having these civil conversations, there's a breakdown, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna actually right before this call, I actually talked to our friend Greg. Greg, I don't know if you want to unmute
Hey, Greg.
on the call, but can I we had a conversation, Ivan, right before this about hiring. Like, so we both have our own businesses and we hire different people. We are not multi-billion dollar companies like what you've
Well,
built out of.
B&I is not a multi-billion-dollar company. We've
Well,
helped
yes,
people create
exactly, exactly.
multi-billion.
But we talked about this whole notion of hiring people, and I know this might be a little bit different than co-creation, but there might be some ties.
There
But
might be,
how,
there's over 10,000 people who work for B&I worldwide.
wow, that's
So
amazing.
yeah,
So like when you talk about co-creation, I'm putting you on the spot, Greg. Do you know what we talked about, the whole what do you call it? Finding people who are as passionate. Do you want to ask your question? I'm totally putting you on the spot.
on the spot, Greg. Good to
Yeah,
see you.
exactly. I think a lot of anyone, even at any stage of scaling a company, understands that when something's just yours as a entrepreneur, of course you care about it because it's your baby, it's your project, your company. And as you start to bring on team members, whether co-creators but really employees, um, identifying during a hiring process or even promoting through training or whatnot, some sense of care and a sense of ownership within those other people to be as on board as you are on trying to make it a success and to make the mission happen.
Thanks, Greg. I love your new mustache too.
It's the only thing that's not gray. That's why it looks like
see, this is what 10,000 employees do for you. I'm just glad I still have here after that. Look, you have a well-crafted question that is a complex answer. And I'll try to make it as simple as possible. There are a number of things that I've learned over the years, some of which I wouldn't have said 40 years ago, but I'd say today. One is slow to hire, fast to fire. And my big thing, years ago was treat loyalty like royalty. But what I found out was that sometimes loyalty is slovenly. And, they may be loyal, but they're not committed. And that became a problem. So slow to hire, fast to fire. You gotta be willing to let people go. I had lunch with Harvey McKay, who wrote Swim with the Sharks Without Getting Eaten Alive years ago. And he was the one that started me on the path of understanding that it's important to let people go when they don't fit the values and the commitment of the company. He said to me, I have lost more sleep over people that I have kept than people I have fired. And I lose sleep over people that I fire. I don't like letting go of people, but I've lost way more sleep over people that I've kept. And that started to change my opinion on the subject. It took a little longer, but that started to change my opinion that when there's just not a good fit, it's best for both parties to let them go. You want to really be clear about your values as a company. It's funny. People are well, it's interesting. They're probably better about understanding company values than they are personal values. But you've got to be really clear about your company values as early as possible. Because if you're not clear about what your company's values are and you communicate those to prospective employees and continue to communicate them to existing employees, if you're not clear, then your employees are going to create their own values for the company, and they might not be what you like. And so B&I, we have 7 core values. We talk about those before somebody gets hired. We actually put them through boot camp.
Wow.
When you get hired by B&I, you have to go through 2 weeks of boot camp where you don't even really do your job much. You're just starting to learn it a little bit, but you're meeting with people from all over the world. You have to go to a certain number of B&I meetings and experience B&I before you can be a bookkeeper or before you can be anything in B&I. You go through boot camp. The boot camp final is a discussion with me about B&I's values. And every time the CEO would open up any staff meeting, he would always pick an employee and say, pick one of B&I's 7 core values and tell me why you like that and why it's important to you. Every meeting, every week, he would have somebody talk about that. So that keeps putting it out front. So it's pretty clear at some point that somebody's not living the values of the company. If you're that good at continuously talking about it, don't just stick them up on a wall and say, these are our values. You got to continuously talk about it.
I
hope that helps.
I love that you make it kind of like a daily part of like your hiring, but also your hiring for fit. And there's so many companies that you do just see the values in the lunchroom or in the break room, and it never gets brought up, any other kind of time.
And ours are so inculcated into the core of the group. You opened with it with Giver's Gain. That's our principal core value. And we had a speaker once come to a B&I conference, and he said, "Well, tell me some of the core values of the company." And I gave him the 7 core values, and I said, "But Giver's Gain is our principal core value." I said, "Everybody knows Giver's Gain. You could walk into a chapter anywhere in the world and say, 'What's our principal core value?' And they're going to say Giver's Gain." And he said, I'll never forget. He said, "Oh, Ivan, that's not true, right?" And I'm like, no, I really believe that's true. And he said, no, the founder of a company always thinks that, everybody knows the principal core value of their business, but that's just not true. And I said, well, don't believe me. Go out on stage and ask everybody what's in 2 words, what's the principal core value of BNI? And I said, if they don't give the answer I just gave you, then I'll buy you dinner. And if they do give you the answer, you buy me dinner. Well, he owed me a really big dinner that night
I love
because
that.
he asked 500 people in the audience, what's the principal core value of
They just
BNI?
yelled it out.
And
Giver's
they all
gain.
yelled it out, giver's gain. And he was like, I have been doing this for decades and I have never seen a company where the customers, the clients, the members knew the principal core value of the business.
As a
That's the
leader,
way you inculcate it in. You got to just drill it into the DNA of an organization.
that's when you know you've gotten it right. When you're
Well, we've gotten at least that one thing right for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So this kind of is in line with the we have a question from Ali and she sent it to me directly. Is there nothing positive about transactional relationships, or do either of us think that they can be appropriate in some instances?
Is there nothing? I don't think there's anything long term positive with a transactional relationship. I mean, I go to the grocery store maybe and I'll buy some avocados. That's transactional. I may not see that person ever again. But if it's business that you're doing on an ongoing basis, I have found it's better to be relational than transactional. So yeah, there may be situations where the transactional works, but no, as a rule, relational is better.
Yeah, I tend to agree too. I think definitely if you're just selling like a widget or, you can be transactional, but any successful business, even the corner shop that's right by my house, it's successful because the owners know all the customers by name. And if I have to decide whether to go to store A or B, I go to their store because they know my name. They know my
Yeah,
daughter. That makes such a big difference, right?
you're absolutely right. Now, I know we're running out of time, but let me tell you a real quick story about relational transactional. I met a guy, it was literally 37 years ago. I remember his name, Nordy Turchin, and he sold commercial light bulbs. Commercial light bulbs, not the kind of light bulbs that you see here in my office, right? So you couldn't even give him a mercy referral. Oh, I'll buy some light bulbs from you. They were commercial light bulbs that go into factories. They're the ones when you flip the lights on, they turn on a little bit and they get brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. They're commercial light bulbs. And so I told him, I said, Nordy, I don't have any commercial light bulbs people in BNI. I don't know that this will work for you. And he goes, no, it'll work fine. He said, but here's the key. He said, even if I don't get referrals, and he said, you don't know me, I'll get referrals. But even if I don't, let me tell you why this will be good, because I'll be able to develop stronger relationships with my clients. And if my client has a challenge and I say, I know somebody that could help you with that, and I refer them to somebody who fixes that problem, I have then helped cement the relationship. And he said, in my business, people will drop a commercial light bulb guy over a few pennies because they're expensive. And so they bring the price down. So I want relationships with people where they don't want to cut me over a few pennies. And by the way, a year later, he won a sales contest for the first time in his life. And he said 40% of all the referrals came from his BNI chapter. So I was like, you're
That is
right, I was wrong.
amazing. So I guess if people want to join BNI, they can just go find the website, right?
Yeah, BNI.com.
Definitely buy the book. And you have another book coming out. Just
I
go
do. I have
to
another book
Amazon and search under his name and
and you
20.
can get it. And if you're interested in, I think I've got it here. If you're interested in the third paradigm, here we go. I've got a QR code.
Awesome.
Yeah, I know. Um,
Technology.
yeah, when it works, it's great. So there you go. If you're interested in the third paradigm, there's a QR code. You can
Awesome.
take a
So
picture.
folks who are kind of in the Zoom audience, those who are watching it live stream, you can just get the
Just go to Amazon.
awesome.
And the latest book, the Infinite Legacy, is also up on Amazon as well.
Awesome. So everyone, I think that they changed the settings where usually how do I do oh well. Those who are in the live Zoom audience, you know the deal. Put off, this is the one time where I ask you to turn on your video cameras, unmute, turn on your video cameras right now. I don't know even if you don't have your hair done. And let's give Ivan a big
Here, I'll
round of
mess up my hair.
applause. Make sure you buy his book, and once you buy the book, make sure you comment, recommend,
Please.
and because that's how we give our authors a hug. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. Thank you, Ivan. You can
My
watch
pleasure.
playback on YouTube, our YouTube live stream on Community of Seven, and I think also on LinkedIn. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ivan.
Thank
You're the
you.
best.
Thank you, Len.